Welcome back to part 2 of dehydrating for health. In part 2 here, we're going to be doing recipe demonstrations, and you can see up on the screen which ones I'm going to be demonstrating. I'll start out with banana crepes, and then some of these recipes I will give you only the recipe. I'm not going to demonstrate them for you because they aren't dehydrated, but they go along with the food that we're making. Mexican tomato crackers, orange cranberry scones, lemony punch macaroons, cauliflower flax pizza crust, banana apple breakfast bread, and then a couple other recipes for your enjoyment. The first recipe that we're going to be making are banana crepes. This is one of the easiest recipes to make. It's so delicious, and for this one I'm going to be using the Vitamix. Now you'll notice that some of these bananas are a little brown, and that is totally okay. This is actually when they're good, when the skin is nice and speckled brown. That's when their sweetness is really starting to come out. So I'm just going to put in 6 bananas. And then I'm going to put in just a tablespoon of lemon. Now this is a lemon squeezer, and a lot of people use this backwards. People think that it goes in like this, the lemon, but it actually goes upside down like this. Just the same as, here's a different kind, and this one also goes upside down. And then of course there's always the traditional round kind. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to squeeze in. It doesn't have to be perfect. The dose doesn't have to be perfect here. It'll be between 1 and 2 tablespoons, and that's fine even if it's a little bit more. Here you can put in different flavors if you like essential oils, if you like Ceylon cinnamon. This is where you can add things. So it's going to get a little loud. And this is a tamper. And this always gets used only when the lid is on. Do not use this when the lid is off, because there's a stop here that won't allow this to go anymore. If you use the tamper without the lid, you're going to chew up your blade and you're going to chew up the bottom of your tamper here. I always start out on low. I always start it out on 1, and I always start it on low here. And then I turn it on, and then I will increase it to 10 and then turn on the high. And that's all there is to it. That's the recipe. And then I'm just going to pour out some, whatever size you want. And if you get too much on there, it's not a problem. You can always just put it on to the next one. But here I'm going to use an offset spatula, just a small one, and I'm going to just smooth it out. Make it as round as you can, just for visual effect, nothing more. You don't want them too thin, and you don't want them too thick. And you do want them to be pretty equal around the equal thickness all the way around, because otherwise it may dry differently in one spot than another. So get it as even as possible. Even sometimes you can make the sides just a little bit thicker, because the sides will generally dry before the middle will, but I don't really find that much of a problem. So it's about an 1/8 to a 1/4 inch here. And there's one tray right there. And I would put these into the dehydrator for probably about 5 to 6 hours. You're going to want to test them, touch them gently with clean hands to begin with. And if they are a little sticky, put them in the dehydrator again for another hour or two. And then you flip it over with another sheet and dehydrator tray, swap it over, and then turn the whole thing upside down, and then you can peel off the back. So I would put these in. And here's what they look like when they come out. So here, I actually, this is a leftover smoothie. And these are what they look like when they come out. So they're nice and flexible. And you can put them on a plate here. This is a cashew cream. This is, I've got a recipe up here for the orangey cashew cream, but I didn't have the ingredients when I was making it this morning. I forgot to pick up some oranges. So this is just a regular recipe, but that is an awesome recipe. I just wanted something different instead of the traditional vanilla. So this one actually is lemon. So this has got a good amount of lemon in it. You can put some berries in it. And if you want, you can put a little toothpick in there, but a lot of times it will stay on its own. And there you go. Breakfast is served in just a few minutes. Okay, welcome to the next recipe. I hope that your mouth is watering for lunchtime. And our next recipe is going to be the Mexican tomato cracker. This one is absolutely delicious. I like foods that are very flavorful. And so we're going to start out with 4 cups of flax. They're just whole flax. 4 cups of tomatoes. I'm going to put in 1 teaspoon each of cumin, some non-irritating chili powder, which I have made myself, and I'll actually give you the recipe in one of the later slides. And I've got 1 teaspoon of celery seed and 1 teaspoon of sea salt. I'm also going to put in about 1/2 cup or more of cilantro, 6 garlics. I wanted to show you a nifty little trick that I have learned about keeping cilantro, parsley, and basil. And that is to put each one of those into its own little jar like you would a flower in a vase. And then I would use a Debbie Green bag, or one smaller than this, because this one's kind of big. But I would just kind of tuck these up, tuck the leaves up under. And especially for parsley and cilantro, this works so well. And then I make a little tent out of it, and I put it in the refrigerator like that. And it will stay for weeks in the refrigerator compared to several days in just the bag or just the water. I found that combination to be really good. So let's get back to the recipe here. Okay, so this is very delicious. It's going to get a little loud. Okay, I've mixed it just a little bit. I'm going to add my water. And that's all that's needed. Now I might let that sit for several minutes just for the flax to gel up a little bit. When it comes to using a spatula, you definitely want to use a hard plastic one. You don't want to use a flimsy one. This one is quite tough and durable. As you can see that it's already got a chunk taken out of it because the blades in the food processor are very, very sharp. So you want to be careful of that. So I'm just going to let this sit here for a minute while I share a little bit about tomatoes with you. Tomatoes are a real superfood, as I've shared with you before. I love tomatoes. They only have about 33 calories in one large tomato. They're about 9% fat, 78% carbohydrates, and 12% protein. Most people have no idea how much protein is in plant foods, but there's plenty of protein in plant foods that we need not worry if we don't eat animal products or the animals themselves. They are filled with B1, B2, 3, 5, and 6. They have loaded with choline, folate, vitamin A, C, E, and K, which are very high. They're filled with calcium, copper, iron, magnesium, manganese, phosphorus, potassium, sodium, zinc, fiber, and it has 13 amino acids. And that is quite amazing for such a tiny fruit that doesn't seem to get much attention in its raw state. But I love tomatoes, so that's been sitting here long enough. And what I'm going to do is put this out on a Paraflex sheet again. These blades are very, very sharp, so be very careful as you take them out. When I wash them in the sink, I usually use a brush so I don't have to use anything that will get close to my hands. But put out a certain amount. This only needs to be about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch thick. You don't want it too thin, so about 1/4 of an inch. But because there's lots of flax in it, it's going to stay pretty congealed and it will gel up very nicely and be a good binder. But I usually try to make these into nice shapes as large as the Paraflex will allow. And if you get too much, you can always just take it off like that and move it around again. And then I tighten up the edges a little bit. Make sure there's no holes, just kind of looks pretty. You don't have to be so perfect. That's just what I do. Because many times I just end up breaking the crackers however they are. Sometimes I will use a pizza cutter and I will cut these in pretty squares. But many times I also just cut them with just break them with my fingers too. Okay, so that is the Mexican crackers. So we'll put this in the dehydrator for 4 to 5 hours. After that, we'll take it out. We will invert another tray on top of it. And after a couple of hours, I'll put a second mesh on top of it to sandwich it to make sure that it doesn't curl up. And when I take it out whole, this is what it looks like when it's dried and it's completely whole. Now at this point you can use a pizza cutter, but it's really too dry at this point to use a pizza cutter, so I would just break them with my fingers into odd shapes. But if you're able to get to it before it dries too much, you can always cut them with a pizza cutter, and then I may make them into different sizes like this, just various sizes. And they're wonderful for dipping. And you can put some hummus on here, whatever you like. Right now we're going to make the orange cranberry scone, and this is one of my favorite breakfast foods, and it is filling, it's satisfying, it's filled with soluble and insoluble fiber, and it's very easy again to make. I love dehydrating because it is so easy, and it's the benefits are so wonderful. So to make this, what I did was I took 4 cups of oat groats, which are the oats that have not been rolled into any rolled oats, or it's not cracked in any way. It's just whole oats. I always get the gluten-free because I don't like to have the gluten in my diet. And you'll see that it actually looks like it's bloomed, just like the bloomed wild rice that I had shown you earlier on the slide. So this is 4 cups then that has bloomed into more, and I soaked it with water overnight, and then this morning I dumped out the water, put it into a colander, and then rinsed it really good with some fresh water, and so here we are. So I'm just going to put this into a food processor. I'm not going to be putting it into the blender because I don't want it to get like a consistency for like a smoothie. So what I'm going to do here, now this recipe requires a couple of different steps. I'm going to put in the hemp hearts. Those are optional if you don't want them. I'm also going to put in orange essential oil. I'm going to put in 15 drops because I love essential oils. And if you put in a few more, it just tastes that much better. I am going to first, many food processors do not process dates very well. I've had several of them break on me. So I have gone to one of the higher end food processors on the market, and I'm very, very happy with this one. It's saved me lots of grief. This one, you can actually put the dates in all at once because it's powerful enough to handle it. But for any other machine, so it doesn't break, you're going to want to put one in right after another, so it's not going to be bogged down with all of these dates all at once. I'm going to start this and then just put in one date at a time. All right, well, you want to blend it until it becomes doughy. So this is a really good consistency. It's got some texture but it's not goopy like a smoothie would be. And then what I'm going to do here, I don't want to grind the nuts and the cranberries in with it and grind it all up. If you want to do that, you could, but I like the texture. So what I'm going to do is just put this in a bowl. And then I'm going to mix it by hand. Now you can use a wooden spoon if you want to, but I just find that it's faster if I just use my hands. So I'm going to put in, and I did chop these a little bit. You don't want them whole, just like you don't want the nuts whole, because you want this to bind together really well. So you're going to want to chop them, you know, coarsely. It doesn't have to be tiny, but you do want them to be coarse enough to give you some good texture. I just find this to be the fastest way. This is one of my favorite recipes I've mentioned. These go in the freezer and they freeze really great. They will freeze. I accidentally forgot that I had some in the freezer a while ago, and they must have been in the freezer for about a year. And I took them out and they were just as delicious as the day that I made them. So they freeze very, very well. And then I put it out onto the screen. Now you can start out on the Paraflex sheet if you want to. And if you want to dry it for a couple hours until it is really, until it's kind of crusty and dry on the outside, you're totally welcome to do that. If you like lemon instead of orange, it's a very forgiving recipe. You can also use dehydrated raisins if you prefer that instead of cranberries. You can also use a different kind of nut. You can use any nut that you prefer. I've made this variety in many different ways. So what I'm going to do now is I don't want to cut directly onto that. So I generally want it about an inch high. So I'm going to cut it into 8. You can cut these in half once they are dried, and you can have them just like you would any other breakfast biscuit. And then I like to take them out, put them on the tray nice and pretty. These go good with a fruit meal. I just love these. They're very filling with all those oats in there. I'll just stick that little guy in there. And I just kind of pretty things up. And there, that's all it is. It's as easy can be. Then you'll want to put them in the dehydrator I like it for about 6 hours. If you want it in for 5 because you like them more moist, put them in for 5. But I like them for 6 because I like that kind. It's in between dry and moist, and if you like them drier than that, then you can put them in for 7. But then this is what they look like when they are dried, and they're nice and firm. But yet when you open them up, they're still soft. And like I said, you can freeze these and they are absolutely delicious. Just take them out about an hour before you want to eat them at least. So enjoy these. Our next recipe is also one of my favorites because I happen to really, really like lemon too. I love lemon water, I love lemon pies, I love anything that is lemony. So I made this one with my lemon taste buds in mind, and I hope that you will also try it and enjoy it. There are enough junky desserts out there that we can indulge on that hurt our health. But this is one that will be tasty and healthy and will not hurt your health. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to again put this into the food processor and not the Vitamix, because I want that grainy texture again. I don't want like a smoothie. So I'm going to put in 1.5 cups of fresh cashews, but these have been soaked overnight in water. In the morning, I rinse them off, and then I put them in the dehydrator for 2 or 3 days. Generally, I find that cashews probably take more time in the dehydrator than any other nut or seed. So it's actually almost probably 3 days. So they are nice and dry though. So that is 1.5 cups. And I'm also going to use some coconut manna. Now, I don't like to use coconut oil, but people think that coconut butter and coconut oil are the same thing, and they aren't. The coconut oil has been separated from the rest of the coconut, where coconut manna actually is the whole coconut that has been ground up. So you'll even see brown specks in here. That is quite normal. So I'm going to put 2/3 of a cup of the manna in here. It's also called coconut butter. I'm going to put in 2 cups of, I like the unsweetened coconut shreds. Now you can also put the coconut in after as well. It doesn't really matter, it just depends on how you like the texture. I am also going to squeeze a couple of lemons, and because I don't really care if it's got too much lemon, I'm just going to squeeze 1.5. It's generally about 3 to 4 tablespoons per lemon. Now I do like to roll my lemons quite vigorously in order to release those juices, and then cut it in half and squeeze them again. And if I put in too much, I'll just be that much happier. And many times, if I just let the lemon sit for a few minutes and try to squeeze it again, I'll actually get probably another tablespoon out. But I love the mouth puckering. And if you want more lemon than that, feel free. Also, these are disposable paper towels, by the way, or non-disposable paper towels. So they come in a roll just like paper towels would, and they get snapped together. And you can then just unsnap them, use it as a paper towel, and then you're not wasting. And then I'm going to do half a tablespoon of vanilla. And again, if you get a little more, it's just that much better. But vanilla is getting pretty expensive these days. And then I'm going to put in the dates. Now again, this blender could handle all of these dates at once, but most people probably don't have this kind of a high-powered food processor, so I'm just going to do one at a time because that's what most people should do. When it's really doughy, then you can open up your food processor and it'll be nice and firm, just like a dough. You don't want to overmix this, or you will turn your cashews into cashew butter, and you don't want to do that. What I'm going to do is take a 2 tablespoon ice cream scoop, and I'm just going to scoop it in just like you would see a macaroon. Now, if you don't want to make macaroons, you can also put it into an 8x8 pan as well. And that 8x8 pan, you can dehydrate, or one of the other great things too, you don't even have to dehydrate these. These are absolutely delicious just the way they are. They're sweet. They're lemony. I can smell the lemon. They are so, so good. So I hope you get to try these at home. You can post them to my Facebook page if you do try them, and let me know how much you love them. They're very quick. Again, I am not into recipes that take too long. I learned that the hard way a long time ago. I spent several days making a particular recipe that called for sprouting and drying of several ingredients, and then I didn't end up liking the recipe. So that was a terrible experience. So I've learned to make recipes that don't require a lot of time. And these are delicious, just like this. You can make them into balls if you don't have a little ice cream scoop. Anything's game with these. Most things that I make are pretty flexible. And if you like something different, if you want to put lemon in here instead of orange instead of lemon, that's totally fine as well. If you like anise, that is also totally fine. And then I would put these in until they have a nice little crust on them. They just get a little crusty and a little hard. You don't want to over dry these. And these keep wonderful, again, in the freezer. They will stay for months and months in the freezer. So there, and then when they are done, they have this nice little shell around them. So I hope you make these at home, and I hope you enjoy them. Well, for our next recipe, we're going to make most people's favorites, and that is cauliflower flax pizza crust. This is another very delicious recipe, and this one uses vegetables as its base, and then it uses flax to kind of put things together. So this requires 4 cups of cut cauliflower, and again, you know, most of the recipes that I make are quite simple. And if you want to change them up and do something different, you're more than welcome to. I actually tried last week to use carrots in my crust, and it didn't work for pizza crust, but it did work into crackers, and they were actually quite good. I'm going to put in sunflower seeds. Again, they have been soaked overnight and dehydrated for a couple of days. These were dehydrated tomatoes that have already been sliced with my kitchen scissors. I've got the binder here is is a psyllium husk, and I've got a salt in there as well. I'm going to throw in a half of an onion. It really doesn't really need to be chopped too much for this kind of a powerful blender or a food processor. I'm going to put the flax in as well as another binder, and I love cilantro and parsley. So I am going to put some cilantro and parsley in there. If you don't like cilantro or parsley, put in something else or leave it out, or put in a dry herb instead. I just happen to like using fresh herbs because I grow them in my greenhouse. And it's basically put everything in there. I'm just going to whiz it up for several seconds just to get everything mixed. I don't have water in there yet because I don't want anything to be soaked up yet. That I just want it to be mixed first. Okay, now you can see why we need a strong blender or a strong food processor. I'm going to have to get a bowl. I'm glad this actually happened so you can kind of see what happens, but if sometimes it's with the tomatoes, if they don't get chopped enough, sometimes it can get binding, but these were chopped pretty good, so it may have just been too much cauliflower for it to happen all at once, and that's fine. So now I'm going to put some water in, and I don't want to put too much in because I want it to dehydrate a little faster. So let me put this in first, whiz this up. Okay, that's pretty well whizzed up. I've got a half a cup of water here. I'm not going to put all of it in, but maybe about 1/3 of a cup. And then you can let it whiz for as long as you would like for the texture. You can see that it's a nice round ball in there. So this is a really good texture here where it is nice and firm and it's all stuck together. And then you will want to, depends on how big of a pizza crust you want. You can just put on a couple or you can put on a big one. Just depends on what you want. I usually use a big one for this, kind of goes a little faster. Now for pizza crust, you don't want these as thin as crackers. You can make them round or square, whatever size you want. And if you want less texture than this, then grind it for longer. But I like the texture. I like just a little bit crunchy. And then I kind of tighten up the edges. Smooth it out again. And if you don't like fresh onion, feel free to leave it out. If you want garlic, put it in. These are very, very forgiving recipes. So feel free to put other herbs on there. If you like, you can put Italian seasoning on top. You can put olives in there. You could put more tomatoes if you want. But this is a pretty good pizza crust here. As you can see, these recipes are very quick. And here's some other recipe. This is a more pizza crust that I have made. So they're a bit smaller, but I find these a little bit small for personal use. I would probably eat 2 of these with no problem. But if you make these at home, take a picture and send me some Facebook pictures. And enjoy. And our last recipe for the day is going to be banana apple breakfast bread. I know there's a lot of people out there who can't do some grains. They choose not to do gluten, or they've chosen to get away from flour or bread altogether. So this is a really nice breakfast bread, and again, it freezes really, really well. So with this one, I've got 3 cups of ground flax already. I'm going to just put that in a bowl. I'm not even going to use my food processor for this one. I've already chopped up 1 cup of walnuts coarsely. I've got Ceylon cinnamon and a little bit of salt. And I did a little apple, but I do have a second apple. And normally what I do for when I'm going to shred something, and it's just something small like 1 apple, I have a special apple core, and so I just take out the center core, and then I actually shred it. Very easy on my shredder here. As you can see, I've already shredded 1 apple on here, and I always use a protective glove. There's nothing like hitting your knuckle or the end of your finger on one of these sharp blades here. And so for me, I just use a protective glove. It just sits in my kitchen drawer, and it's just really easy to clean. I just put it under the sink and some water, and if it gets, if I have beets on it or something like that, then I may use some dish soap on it, but they're really easy to clean. They don't cost very much, and they save your fingertips too. So I'm glad to use one of these. Now, I have used Ceylon cinnamon in this recipe and another one because I don't use regular cinnamon. Cinnamon can be a real irritant to many people, and it's really an irritant to the stomach. And you know that it is because it creates sweating, and we feel hot when we take regular cinnamon. And I don't do really any spices or seasonings that are hard on the stomach or that are an irritant. So that's step 1 there. And so Ceylon cinnamon is a lot more mild, and you do have to use a little more of it, but I like it, and it's quite flavorful. So what I have here, I'm going to put this in the food processor, and so that's 4 bananas. Get another cloth paper towel here. And I'm just going to put in 4 dates. They've already been, I've already taken the seed out. You want to be really careful with dates. You do want to make sure that you take the seed out, of course, but also there's a number of them that could be infested with some bugs. So if you see anything in there that is with a bunch of black dots, you just want to throw that date away, and they aren't good. So again, I'm just going to put in about a tablespoon of vanilla, And if I get a little extra or a little less, that's okay. It's all good. And then I'm just going to put in about a 1/4 cup of liquid. You don't want to put too much in because then it takes a lot longer to process, to dry. I just put in about a 1/4 cup of nut milk. And in the next slide, I actually will have the recipe for you. And to make nut milk is very, very simple. It's basically, what I do is 4 cups of water to a 1/4 cup of nuts. And if you want it a little thicker or a little richer, you can do 1/3 of a cup. I know some people do 4 cups of water to 1 cup of nuts. For me, that is way too rich. So I prefer between a 1/4 cup and a 1/3 of a cup. And 4 dates. So 1 date per 1 cup of water. And that works for me. Here, I'll put this up for you. So if you wanted to copy it or take a picture of it, and I'm just going to process this now. Okay, you just want to make sure it's not too runny. And if you want to put in less milk, you certainly can do that as well. But I find that's a good amount. You know, I find when I start to look up the ingredients for whole foods, anything that is fruits and vegetables, I think fruits and vegetables usually get a bad rap, especially fruit these days. And fruit is actually our species diet. We should be having plenty of fruit in our diet. I know that it seems like there are agencies and people that promote that fruit is a cause of all sorts of disease. But actually it's fruit that we need because most of the disease actually is a cause from fat, such as diabetes and heart disease. And it's not the natural fruit sugar in its whole state. So more fruit is better. It would be better if I was able to let this sit for about 10 minutes, and then it will get a lot firmer because of the flax. But this will do for now. And at least you kind of get an idea. But if you let it sit for 10-15 minutes, you'll see that it won't be as soft. Or instead of a 1/4 cup of nut milk, you can always add a tablespoon less. But I generally do bread. This isn't going to look as pretty because the flax hasn't congealed yet. About 1 inch tall. I just kind of make them into the shape of bread. And you can just kind of smooth it. So you can already see that it's gelling up a little bit more. So that's nice. And if you want to make 4 smaller loaves, you certainly can do that as well. You don't need to make this size, but I generally stick to about 1 inch tall. And this is going to be absolutely delicious when it comes out of the dehydrator. And again, this is a recipe that freezes very, very well. And then, so I'm going to dehydrate this for probably 3 hours, and then I will take it out and take it off the Paraflex sheet, and then I will slice it in about 3/4 inch for each one. And when it's all done, all the bread looks like this. You can see that I still have a chunk of the bread here, and I can just cut that up to whatever size I want. But then I make them pretty uniform shape, and then enjoy. You can put peanut butter on, you can put almond butter, your favorite jelly. You can really put anything that you want on them, but it's a wonderful breakfast bread, and they go with almost anything. So I hope you're able to make these at home and that you enjoy them as much as I do. And thank you so much for joining me for this two-part series on dehydrating.